and welcome back to Anna Rose Reads the podcast. I am your host, Anna, and it's been a bit chilly in the US these last few weeks, and if there was ever a book to talk about in this kind of weather, it is Rebecca Rowland's Eminence Front. A very chilly, blizzardy, isolated, quite terrifying story about a snowstorm that hits with more than meets the eye than just the cold. That's all I'll say. And Rebecca joins me to talk about this book. We talk about all kinds of things, how fear and isolation can lead to madness and horror, how we really don't like teeth-related horror, how it really freaks us out, and so many other things like writing small confined horror and the things that you don't know that go on behind closed doors. It is a really, really lovely conversation. I am so thankful to Rebecca for making the time to come on and chat so in depth about her work and her writing and just how she's gotten here. So without further ado, I hope that you all enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Hello, Rebecca. How are you?
I am well. Thank you so much for having me on here.
I am thrilled to have you on the podcast. I just read your book that we're going to be talking about today, Eminence Front, at the beginning of the year. And boy, oh boy, as we were just discussing before I clicked record, how fitting for the weather that we're having this
Oh
year.
my God, it is. It's like this weird, like Twilight Zone nightmare up here with all the snow. In fact, I almost took a picture yesterday because up here in Massachusetts, we were hit with about a foot and a half of snow from Fern. And I don't know what happened. I actually live on a main street, but first of all, my plane was delayed. And so by the time I got back, it probably wasn't until 2 days after the storm, but I came back and I don't know what's going on. I don't know where my tax dollars are going, but they barely plowed my
Oh
street.
man, yeah.
It's a 2-lane road. It's a main road. There's only one car length, the car width plowed. And so my neighbor right across, like diagonally across the street from me, somehow obtained some sort of, I know he's never had a plow before, but the next day, all of a sudden he had a plow and he just went to work and ended up plowing out the rest of our street. However, there's really no place to put the snow.
Yeah, I
And
saw
so
that on
now
social media. Like, what do you do with
yeah,
it? Like, where does it
right. It
go?
just sort of piles places.
Yeah.
And in this case, it's piled on my front lawn. And
Oh no.
so it's at least 6 feet of, piled up of snow. And so I almost took a picture because it's just even looking at it, I thought, oh gosh, that's the nightmare right there, right there.
Yeah,
The
no,
epitome.
absolutely. Well, I think it's
Yeah.
kind of funny. Like, if you really wanted to get meta with it, you could write about an author whose snow story, snow horror book comes to life and the
Right?
ramifications of that. Yeah, if you want to take it to the next level. Oh man. Well, I'm in Louisiana, and even we're putting like salt on the roads, and I'm like, what the? I had never seen that before. I mean, like last year. Last year we actually did get snow, but we weren't, I
Mhm.
don't think, as prepared as we were this year because of how bad it was last year. Um, Weird times. Weird times for it to even be a consideration here where I'm at. So,
Well, yeah, and if you don't have, if your DPW isn't sort of, prepared for it, doesn't have the equipment for it,
oh
I
yeah, no.
understand. A good friend of mine's from Georgia, and she lives up here now, but she said, oh gosh, if we even got like a dusting in this sort of weird anomaly, they would shut down everything for a week. And
Yeah, no. That's
of
pretty much how it
course,
is in here too.
yeah. So yeah, but I mean, like we were saying, like I can't think of really any place in the country that is temperate and doesn't have something going on with the weather that's a pain. So
Yeah. Well, hey, look, the weather's just really cooperating with your book release. That's going to be the way that we choose to spend this.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So first and foremost, again, I just want to thank you for coming on the show, and I want to give you the opportunity to kind of introduce yourself, and then we'll talk about your book a little bit more. But this is the first time that you come on the podcast, so if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself to my listeners, I will let you take the floor.
Okay. Well, I am Rebecca Rowland. I am a writer and editor of dark fiction. I started my writing, my professional writing career started, actually I was doing ghostwriting. And what I call, and everyone tells me to stop calling it this, fluffing for people. So if they were creating, it was through a company, if there was a celebrity who was, writing a blog, but they were, barely literate, they would sort of give it to the company to fluff up, to make it sound coherent and actually, sometimes do some of the research and, or even, just social media posts here and there, but memoirs, just, books or whatever, and sort of, and I never got credit. I never got
Yeah.
formal credit, monetary credit, but not formal credit. And it wasn't really until, gosh, I was in my early 40s that I just decided, I'm like, I'm gonna kind of go for it. I'm gonna put my own fiction out there and sort of see what happens. And now I am the editor of seven, I think seven horror anthologies, a handful of books, novels, novellas, short story collections, and I just love doing it.
Yeah.
By day, I mean, I don't pay the rent with it, but by day I am a high school teacher. And it's just coincidentally, yesterday, one of my students was staying after school to do some work, and she's starting to get into reading.
Yeah.
And she's really excited about this. And she said, Miss, why did you start writing? It was such a weird question because no one's ever asked why, like why. Not, they
Yeah.
always ask how did you start doing this? Sort of why are you writing this type of fiction? And I said, what do you mean why? And she said, well, why? Why would you want, why would you even want to do this? And not in a derogatory way, but more of a, she was honestly, she just, for her, something that would be fun would be like making art or crochet or, listening to music. And I sort of, I tried to explain it that way. I said, when I was a kid, I loved to create stories. I loved to write. Um, I loved to write, all the way through my teen years, 20s, 30s. It was just something that I enjoyed doing. Some people like to play music. Some people like to play baseball. Some people, they like to play pinball, whatever it is that brings them joy. And it's just something that, and I have no idea why. I don't know why it is, but, and so I don't know, it brings me joy most of
Yeah.
the time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like with all things, there's always headaches that come with it. But no, that's like it's such a strange thing to feel called, I think, to create story because it's very ironic because you're being kind of called to like give words to imaginary things. But then when you're asked like why you're doing it and to give words to that imaginary feeling, it's very difficult to do. So no, I kind of get the off-guardedness of that question. And I do kind of want to revisit and ask, your experience with ghostwriting and writing behind the scenes, and then kind of moving into the space where you are now editing and writing for yourself. How was that experience for you? Like, what did that feel like for you, that transition?
It, well, I was very fortunate because the company that I worked for, that hired me first as a copy editor and
Mm.
then, had me in for, actually sort of promoted me to becoming an acquisitions editor after reading the slush file for a year. They were extremely kind to me and they were very trusting and they were very open to wanting to see what else their company could do. And they are the ones that gave me the job of editing my first anthology. They said,
Yeah.
hey, we think we want to branch out and do a couple of horror anthologies. Would you be interested in editing it? And I said, I have absolutely no idea how to do that. And they said, well, why don't you figure it out?
Yeah.
And we'll let you do this, within, and they gave me a lot of rope, so I really could have messed it up. And I did, stumble, and there were a lot of things I had to learn. But otherwise, it was a really interesting experience. It was very challenging. When people say to me, like, oh, I'm thinking about editing an anthology, I always wonder sort of why, like what is it that's making, because that wasn't my idea. Again, it
Yeah.
was the company that approached me, but I continued to do it. And I think the reason I kept going back to it is I really like sort of figuring things out. And editing anthology is not just sort of slapping things together and then putting your name on it. You really have to do a lot of figuring out where the pieces go, and you have to do a lot of multitasking, wear a lot of different hats. And so when, like I said, when people say, oh, I'm thinking about doing this, I always think, like, why? Why? And also, there's no money in it. I'm going to tell you right now. I mean, unless,
Yeah.
you have someone like a big five, publishing company behind you, the money's not there. And the glory really isn't for the editor, and it shouldn't be. It's really coming from the writers that help create this beautiful symphony that you end up with. But yeah, I mean, doing that, it was challenging and rewarding. I got to meet people who, writers that ended up being in my first couple anthologies, who I am now friends with,
Mhm.
10 years later. And I'm really glad, I'm very, fortunate for that. They're great people. And I also got to learn, I think, the hard way, the business of publishing.
Yeah.
It's, yeah, it is what it is. But it was
Yeah.
a really, it was a great experience. Seeing my name
Mhm.
on a book for the first time, it was surreal. It was the most surreal experience ever. But I think the most surreal experience as an author with her name on something was hearing it as an audiobook and
Oh yeah,
hearing
yeah,
the
yeah.
words that were in my head come out of someone else's mouth. It's just such a weird and fun and cool and strange and wonderful experience.
Yeah, it sounds very trippy to kind of have that, like your innermost, creativity come out of somebody's mouth. But I think, and this is just like a thought experiment on my end because I'm obviously not an editor and I'm not an author, but I would imagine that kind of, especially when it comes to anthologies, picking a theme, finding
Mhm.
stories that carry that theme in a way that is beneficial and cohesive, and then like also working with the authors to kind of fine tune their stories, and then additionally putting them in the correct order that you feel like, is
Mhm.
beneficial to the reader, like all of these different things. It does kind of, I feel like, lend itself to story, like to writing an actual story in some ways, because you kind of have to keep the moving parts together in some of those ways. But obviously, whenever you're writing for yourself and your stories, it's only your work. You're not having to have that collaborative effort with other people. Do you find that that's like a similar kind of feeling? Like, do you find that your experience in editing has helped you with your writing, or?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm really glad you asked this, because I think that it came in handy in particular for Eminence Front
Yeah.
because of the sort of extra pieces that are in there, sort of the news report
Yeah.
that's here, the autopsy report that's here. Um, the program that I use to write, and I completely misuse this program, and so I will never be their spokesperson, but I use Scrivener. And so if any authors are listening, and you use Scrivener, you probably use it correctly. I mean, I guess if you use it correctly, it's supposed to be a real time saver where you can, you know, do all sorts of exporting and importing and all sorts of stuff. I have no idea. I use it because you can sort of write chapters out of order and then just
Mm.
drag and drop them. Like, that's the only thing that I use really Scrivener for. Otherwise, I could easily just use a regular Word program or whatever. But it was helpful for Eminence Front. I don't tend to write from beginning to end
Mhm.
anyway. I tend to be someone that will write chapters that I really am excited about writing and exploring, and characters that I really like, doing those first. Like I eat my dessert first. I feel like I'm an adult. I can do that. If I want a cookie for dinner, I can just do it. And that's how I write as well. And it also keeps me motivated because if you have to sort of leave the chapters that you're not thrilled about writing to the end, by that time you have so much of it done that it's much easier to do. But with Scrivener, I could write those chapters, and especially these extra pieces, I could move them and
Yeah.
sort of look at the chapter before, look at the sort of the feel of that one, look at what I wanted to achieve with this news report, or what did I want to do with the autopsy report, and make sure that it's exactly where I want to drop that breadcrumb.
Hmm.
Um, so absolutely, that sort of organization skill, which I do think is important for anthologies.
Oh yeah.
Some anthologies, I think they have brilliant work in them. I think that they're edited as far as content very well, but organized maybe not as well. I really do see an anthology as a piece of music where you have to make sure that everything flows and that people aren't going to turn off the song before it's over. You want to keep them interested. You want to keep them entertained, and also feel like they're in for the ride with you, and not sort of wondering like, what the heck is this story doing here? And now this feels very jarring and not on purpose. And so, yeah, absolutely. I do think that the skill came in very handy for this book.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think too, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in a minute, but with Eminence Front, we kind of do, and this lends itself, I think, really well to small town horror. When you do that perspective jump between townspeople and you get that kind of interview into their lives, that really like, fly on the wall feeling. I think that helps too to kind of have that separation. Like, in a perfect world, I imagine it's like you get one big giant whiteboard, you pin everything up, and then you can organize it that way. But of
Yeah.
course, that's not logistically possible. So I can see where something like that would come in handy. But before we jump too far into the book, do you want to go ahead and introduce the plot of Eminence Front, and we can get into the weeds with this novel?
Okay. All right. I'm terrible at log lines. I mean, in fact, I'm so awful that I don't even have a copy of the book in front of me. So I'm just going to sort of spitball and say it takes place on a suburban street in New England that is very used to winter weather, right? Everyone is sort of jaded about all of these news reports that come up, like, oh, make sure you have enough, milk and bread or whatever. And but there are things going on in these homes that maybe people don't realize are going on in them unless they live in the home, and even sometimes when they live in the home don't realize it. And at the same time, a blizzard buries this street in snow, and as the snow begins to fall, gosh, how do I say this without, I'm so bad with, I can't do it without spoiling. It's about a snowstorm that affects and infects a small town neighborhood, I
I like
guess.
that
That's
line.
that's
Yeah. That's,
that's
yeah,
gonna be
no,
my
that's
log
good.
line on the fly.
That's very, very good. No, I like that. That fits very well. And I really love that, when we open the book, it's not set just to the suburban street, but like within, a mere amount of pages, we pretty much are locked into the setting. I love the claustrophobia that kind of is instituted with something like this. And like, for me, and we were talking about the weather earlier, like I would panic in that situation because that's not my norm. But also I tried to flip my thinking to put myself in these character shoes. Like whenever we hurricane prep around here, like everybody just goes buy alcohol. Nobody really worries about going get essentials because
Yeah.
everybody's so used to it. So like I was thinking in that mindset for them, and then for it to have this turn, this like very kind of turned on its head, you should really be worried. Twist was really, really interesting. And I'm kind of curious for you how it felt to write something that's one, kind of so dreadful, but two, also limited in terms of setting.
Oh. Okay. Limited in terms of, I mean, I have to tell you that for me, setting is always something that I put first and foremost in
Yeah.
my writing. Like I have to see every place that I write about. And so 99% of the places that have appeared in all of my fiction are places where I've lived, worked, traveled. They're, friends' houses, friends' apartments. And so this setting was very easy for me to create because it's actually based on my own street where
Hmm.
my little house is. And but my neighbors are not like these people. I always have to make sure that I say that. Not that any of them are necessarily reading my books or anything, but I think my neighbors are very kind, like you and I were talking about with snow and everything. And my neighbor across the street, going out and sort of getting his plow and plowing us out. They're lovely people. But the genesis of the story was actually it was inspired by a real tragedy that happened on my street. And it happened to happen during a terrible blizzard that hit us a couple of years ago. And it was so upsetting to me. And I really didn't know where to put my feelings. And I thought about it and thought about it and thought about it. And it was later that night, and I was sort of sitting in my living room, and I could see the snow outside, and it just came to me. I said, I'm going to write about a snowstorm that affects people, but I really want it to be about not not knowing yourself as well as maybe you should, and not knowing your neighbors, thinking you know your neighbors and not actually knowing them, and all of that sort of semi-paranoia maybe that
Yeah.
happens. And I think claustrophobia, would only ratchet up that paranoia. Um, so yeah, I think a small, like a street, I mean, I could have sort of expanded it and made it a whole town. And in a way, the book does say, this isn't really something that only happens on this particular street. But I wanted to be able to really look at characters, and I wanted to get to know these characters. And originally I had even fewer neighbors, and I thought, well, this feels weird because if they're on a street, there are going to be other people that live there, and it's going to be like, well, who's living next to John? Like, why are we not hearing about them? And so I wanted to at least get a good swath of the street, enough. Really, the span of neighbors are the neighbors that John, who is the first character we meet, can see from his house.
Yeah.
And, we find out really early on, John is agoraphobic. So
Mhm.
what he knows of his street is really just what he can see from his window. And so those are the neighbors that are in the story.
Yeah, that's a very unique setup, and I like having that kind of scope to set us off, when we start the book. And I think, to kind of go back to the idea of you think you know what goes on in XYZ house, but you don't really. One, there's a lot of drama there that I think makes for really compelling storytelling. And that's like one of the things I really loved about this book was I was there for the interpersonal drama that played out between everybody and kind of how you see one thread pulled one place and then how it affects, you don't think it'll affect the next neighbor, but then it does kind of. There's, spouses who are having marital issues and relationship issues, and then there is a neighbor who has an ailing mother who frequently wanders out of her house, she's not doing too well. So there's like all these levels of like life drama is the way that I like to think about it that kind of impact this whole street. And, like you said, not really knowing what goes on behind closed doors really lends itself to fear. So I want to kind of talk about the relationship between like drama and fear and why they work really well to make a compelling story, especially in this case.
I mean, what I am, and I tell people this, and I think a little too proud of it. I am very aware of, my baggage and sort of the tropes and the motifs that pop up in my work all the time. Everything from, betrayal trauma to drug abuse and alcoholism and getting older as a woman. And so these things pop up all the time. But what I like to now think of what I'm trying to do is I'm writing Gen X, Gen Y horror. I rarely write about characters that aren't within 10 years of my own age at the time of writing the piece. And I think more than any other work that I've done, Eminence Front is full of the anxieties that I see my own friends going through and going through myself um, as someone of a certain age, right? Someone in their 40s and 50s. And whether it is taking care of elderly parents, because, more and more of my friends, that's, the sort of the relationship has shifted. I have a number of friends who are taking care of parents with dementia, or are just, in some way physically unable to do the things that they used to do. And that's an awful lot of stress. I, watched half of my friends' marriages break up, collapse. I've watched friends of mine who, once they turned a certain age, all of a sudden, start becoming uh, hyper vigilant about how they look and sort of comparing themselves to, women in their 20s and 30s and having that anxiety of not being good enough and it turning into something that I think is problematic thinking. And I think that comes out in the Kim character.
Yeah.
And people just becoming jaded, sort of in their own jobs, in their own lives. And, it's funny when I was writing these characters, and I like all of them. I like all of them, and I think because they each have something of mine that I've sort of thrown in there, and so I like them. They're like my children, but each one of them, at first when I was writing them, I thought, oh God, some of them I don't like this character. Like they're just not likable. And still to this day, there have been people who have read Eminence Front and they say to me, like, I don't like anyone on the street. Like, and that's a problem. I'm like, is it? Because I don't feel like it's a cheering for the character story at all. For me, I think that this book is really about these characters having like a come to Jesus moment about what the hell they're doing in their lives. And the snow is forcing them to do that in one way or another, whether it's actually coming in sort of infiltrating, their lives and leading them down a destructive path, or it's trapping them in their homes and making them sort of reevaluate, what's going on in their own lives. So as far as, personal drama and horror, I think, I look back at being in my 20s and 30s and what scared me then. And I'm not scared of any of those things at my age now. What I'm honestly scared of are things like, someone I love, losing control of their mind, losing control of my own mind, having the relationships that I trust the most not be reliable, losing the people that are most important to me. Those are the types of things that scare me now. And so that's really what's going on with a lot of these characters. And what happens to a lot of these characters,
Yeah. Well, yeah, I just really appreciate that where we're at in the modern horror genre is giving so much room to these very realistic horrors, I guess is where the real horror of a lot of these like stories, much like yours, really like come out to me. You know, there is the supernatural element, and I'm not gonna say what it is, obviously, because that would spoil things, but you know, like that's there to kind of ratchet things up. But what really speaks are these very things that you're talking about, and like that's really where I get hooked in with these characters, you know, from every different household with their struggles this way, because it feels like maybe I'm not experiencing that, but I saw, you know, older friends go through it, or like I've seen my parents go through it a few years ago. You know what I mean? Like there's different, you know, variances of that we are all, I think, have some touchstone to relate to. Um, but I do kind of want to pivot to the supernatural horror and
Yeah.
the violence that is in this story because it is, I find, a very gory story, but it's almost like a slasher in some of these kills, but this is not a slasher. So I wanted to give you the space to talk about your creative kills, where the inspiration behind some of those came from, and just writing with this kind of violence amid all of these other things that are going on.
Well, it's so funny because when I was first writing, and I'm a short story writer at heart, and so when I was first getting pieces published, it was short stories, and a friend of mine, and he happens to be, in fact, I thank him in the back of the book. His name is Anthony, and he knows everything there is to know about anatomy and physiology. That's what he teaches. And he was a horror fan, and he still is a horror fan. And so, you know, I can remember a decade ago going to him and saying, I'm thinking about killing someone in a story like this. You know, is this feasible? What goes on here? And he would always help me. And he said to me, he had come to me and said, oh, there's this convention happening, you know, wherever it was, XYZ, and it's specifically for body horror. You know, you should, you know, kind of check it out. And I said, body horror? I don't write that. And he said, the hell are you talking about? That's all
Based
you
on our
write for
conversations.
horror. Right, exactly. And I guess it really made me look, and I thought, because I never considered myself really a horror writer, more of a dark fiction writer, because most of my work is more psychological, quiet, art house, horror, where I don't have a lot of action. It's much more about sort of a creeping dread and a gradual feeling of discomfort that just grows and grows and grows. And and then, you know, occasionally I'll have these pieces of violence, and they're almost always, now that he made me sort of examine this, they're almost always these really horrific, awful, terrible things that happen to people's bodies. And um, I mean, with this particular book, I always like having sort of the sin turned against the sinner, right? Almost
Yeah,
like
yeah.
this Dante's Inferno kind of, you know, thing where the character dies in a way that seems very fitting to how they lived, or that I could foreshadow it in some way. And the very first, in fact, I ended up writing this chapter, I think maybe first or second out of all of the narrative chapters in the book. There's a character, I won't say which one, who keeps a map in their home, and it's sort of, and it stays up in their home. It was something that was sort of created with a spouse that has long since abandoned the marriage, but the character keeps it up, right? And I, as soon as I thought of this map, I thought, I know exactly what I want to happen to this character. And so I actually called up my friend Anthony and I said, this is sort of what I want to do. And he said, well, let me tell you. And he was so thorough about what had to happen in order for someone to die this way. And never said to me, in fact, I don't think I even said it was for a book. I said, hey, could I just ask you, like, if this were to happen? And he was so thorough and never once said, like, this is for a story, right? It's not like something that you're doing to, like, you know, like an X or something. Yeah, there probably, I would say, half the characters in Eminence Front, they their deaths are very specific to how they live. And um, gosh, what can I say without spoiling? I really enjoyed writing these deaths because the way that they most of them die are ways that scare the bejesus out of me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so, and they're things that, God, I think, gosh, if I wasn't in my right mind, I could see this, air quote, accidentally happening. And to me, that's scary. So I write what I think is what I write what scares me.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And it has like that final destination quality of like one wrong like chain reaction away from disaster. Like one false move and this certain death is, on the table. But I also want to like ask you, how does it feel to write it? Because like whenever you have a story such as this that's so grounded in reality, like, we just talked about all the human horrors that really come through in the story and for all of your characters. Um, I imagine it would feel kind of, dare I say, fun and freeing to move into the space where like kind of anything can happen. Like I feel like there's less rules and constraints. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, yes, but I always want the deaths to be realistic because there are some that, gosh, there was a movie that came out. Now I'm going off on this tangent where I can't even remember the name of the movie. It came out last year. It was that one that was very sound heavy, where it felt very Friday the 13th, and everyone was sort
Yeah.
of lauding it. Whoever's listening to this, if you think you're
Yeah.
probably screaming the name of it, like, yes, it's this. But I remember watching it and talking about it with my friend Lewis, who we always talk about horror films, and he said, it was really good. The deaths were really creative. However, there's this one death of a woman who's standing on the cliff above water. And
Oh,
the
I know what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about now. You just said it and it came to me. Hold on, I'm
right.
gonna look it up now. Hold on. Okay,
Okay.
proceed.
Yeah, look it up while I yap about this. Because I remember, who am I saying? This is where they jumped the shark because every other piece of this film, you can suspend your disbelief and you're like, yeah, like this would be horrible if this happened to me. And you look at this and you're like, this would never happen to me because it doesn't ever happen, even if you accept sort of the supernatural aspect of it. And yeah, I just, what, in my head, I call it the leaves crunching movie because you hear the
Yeah,
leaves crunching
it's
everywhere the
very
guy goes.
auditory. Yeah, and it's from the slasher's perspective. This is gonna kill me until I
Yeah.
find it because I cannot remember it. I remember I watched it on Shudder, and there's the
Yeah.
scene with the log splitting that I like muted my
Yes.
TV because I was like,
Y-
I can't do this right
It's,
now.
yeah, whoever did the sound direction on that, I mean, bravo. Like, I mean, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
so close to finding this. A Violent Nature, in A Violent
A
Nature, that's
Violent
what it
Nature.
is.
Okay.
Okay,
Yes.
there we go. Okay.
Correct.
That was killing me
So,
because I was like, I can see what you're talking about, but yes, no, that makes sense. And like, especially I think visually too with movies, it's always like, is this just for shock effect or is this like meaningful? And I think that that's the thing that you're kind of getting at with these deaths that makes sense for the character line is like it's not something random that you just kind of pulled out of thin air to be like, oh, let me gross the reader out. Like it does follow a through line of what that character is dealing with in an ironically very poetic way.
yeah. Yeah. And it actually made me, I got to tell you, even thinking about that character with the map, that death, I was actually kind of sad. And it was the first sort of arc that I wrote and I finished and everything because I think it's the one character who really it's very clear that this character understands what's been done and what could have been done differently and has deep and utter regret, you
Yeah.
know, and is really it dies very poetically.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was. I mean, that death, yeah, that death, the death of another character in a car is
Yeah.
I have, so the one thing, everyone has a body part that they don't ever want to see, poked or slashed in a movie. I don't, a lot of my friends are like, please don't show me or write about anything with fingernails. It freaks me out. Please don't do that. Or if you have something with eyes, please,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This
give me a
That's
heads
me.
up.
I can't do the eyes.
Yeah, I mean, and I
And
get
teeth
it.
too.
Like
Yeah.
teeth, so teeth are mine. So I can't, I don't like when people get teeth knocked out. I don't like when people
Ah.
have sharp teeth. I don't like when people are
hmm
biting other people. I have no idea why. I don't have any weird like childhood trauma. Um,
No, but
you
there's just
know,
something. I think for me, it's like I think I very vividly like remember losing my teeth as a kid and like feeling that wrongness in your mouth and the taste of blood just like
yeah,
oh, it stuck with me
yes,
so bad.
yeah. I mean, maybe that's it. Maybe that's where our personal, sensitivities about this come from. I mean, I don't know, but yeah, and every time I write it, and every once in a while it does pop up, and it does pop up once in Eminence Front, and it's one of those things where even just writing it gave me the willies.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
it's just
I
bleh.
I have to ask, did you happen to see Bring Her Back?
Okay, so let me tell you. So let me tell you my story with this. So I had gone to see that director's other movie,
Was
the
it the
Talk to
Talk
Her,
to
Talk to
Me?
Me.
Yeah, yeah, Talk to Me.
So I saw that in the theater.
That was another
I actually,
auditory heavy one for me.
oh my God, and there are some scenes in that movie. Holy
You talk about messed
like,
up teeth. They have a problem with teeth and yeah, yeah.
yeah. So I went to see it with, I had a writing partner that I would write. We put out a few books. We wrote together for years and years and years. And we used to always go to all the horror movies together. And he was sitting next to me. It was like opening night. And there's this, and I'm not spoiling this because this movie's relatively older now, right?
Yeah.
But there's that scene where the younger kid, he's like 14, he decides he's going to, do the seance thing or whatever, and then he gets his head smashed up
The
against,
bashing. Yeah.
right.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I rarely have to sort of cover my eyes and look away from a movie. I was so horrified. I mean, I'm like curled up in my seat, and then I happen to look next to me, and I am not exaggerating. It's a 4 or 5-year-old child
Oh
sitting in the
God.
seat next to me. His babysitter is on the other side, just like eating the popcorn, like staring at the screen. I look at the kid because I'm thinking, oh my God, is this kid, he's going to have nightmares forever.
Yeah.
And he was just sort of, staring at the screen. And now I realize this is probably a kid that's going to be, I don't know, murdering people. And, right
Or the
about
next
now,
best
I'd
horror
say,
writer. It could go two ways.
yeah, it's going to be one or the other. Hopefully, choose wisely, kid.
Yeah.
But so I know this is a long story short. I did find that movie to be really effective, fantastic, just very original. And so when Bring Her Back was advertised, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to see this film. I have to see it. And for some reason, it just didn't come into
hmm
theaters around me. And so I kept waiting and waiting for it to come on streaming. And a lot of these movies will pop up in the UK before they pop up here for whatever reason. And so that's where my friend Lewis lives. And so he saw it immediately. He saw it as soon as it came out
Yeah.
on streaming and texted me. And he's never done this before. Texted me and said, don't see this movie. It's
No,
going to
yeah.
freak you the fuck out. You will. I know your issue with teeth. And I'm like, well, how bad is it? Does someone get bitten? He goes, listen, you don't even want to know.
It's
It
so
is
much
so
worse. It's
bad.
so much worse.
Right.
Yeah.
It's so bad. I don't even want to describe it to you because even thinking about it is going to freak you out. And for the
hmm
first time, um, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to watch it.
You listen,
I'm
yeah,
going to
you
take his
listen.
advice. because otherwise I would be like a child, be like, well, I'm going to see exactly how scary it is. No, for Lewis to say to me, please don't watch that. Like I
No, no,
knew.
that's a good friend. That's a really good friend. Because
Yeah,
so I know when I get too overwhelmed. And Talk to Me was one, like I sat the whole movie pretty much with my shoulders in my ears. Like I knew, like it wasn't a fun experience for me to watch that movie in the theater.
yeah,
So I was like, okay,
yeah.
whenever Bring Her Back, I'm gonna wait till it comes out on streaming. So I watched it on streaming. And it was, again, it was another one like you just have to mute. And I've talked to a few different people about it. It's the sound editing on it that is so upsetting. In addition to everything else, but that's just like
Yeah,
really the icing on the cake. But no, good friend to Lewis in the UK for giving you the heads up because it's
yeah.
intense. It is a
And
very intense
good,
movie.
good for that sound editor. I mean, apparently, I mean,
Yeah,
if what
no.
did he, that's the silver lining. Apparently, that sound editor is absolutely a rock star. But yeah,
But
teeth.
no, there were a few deaths in your book though that I'm glad that there wasn't sound editing for because I would have been like, whoo, I need to mute the TV on that one. But no, I do like that there's a particular blend of horror that exists in Eminence Front. We've talked about the human component. We've talked about this like supernatural kind of violence. And then we've kind of hinted to the claustrophobia of this, but there's also this factor of isolation. And I'll never forget when I was in high school and we were learning, shit, I think it was The Raven, by Edgar Allan Poe. We were talking about how like fear and isolation can lead to madness, like thematically, and like where we see this pop up in like Poe's other stuff and all this other stuff. And I feel like that is a theme that I am like a real sucker for. I'm just there for every time I can get it because it's like the slow unraveling of a person by themselves. And you'd kind of twist that notion on its head because it's a bit ironic. It's supposed to be this close-knit street of neighbors, but they are wholly isolated, and then we really don't know what's going on behind closed doors. So I think Eminence Front does lend itself to this theme of fear and isolation leading to madness. Would you agree with that statement? And like, did you think about that while you were writing the book?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm glad that you brought that up because that is actually a trope that I enjoy as well
Mhm.
in fiction is the character that is forced to just be with themselves, right?
Yeah.
And especially in this day and age where people are never really alone with their thoughts, right? I ride the train all the time to New York City. And I always make sure, that my headphones are charged, that I have my charger for my phone, because I am one of those people who, I'm going to put in a podcast. I'm going to put in an audiobook. I can't just, it's rare nowadays that I'm able to be alone in my thoughts. But I think that when I am, that's when you really you solve things that maybe you had been sort of pondering and you're not sure what to do. You can't really do that when you're being distracted by all of this media. And so if you're isolated and you're forced to be alone and you're forced to be with you, I think that it does lead down some very strange avenues, whether it's you start to think about things that you didn't want to think about before and you're able to mute, or you start to take inventory, of yourself and sort of things that maybe you hadn't thought about in a long time. And so, yeah, when I see, any sort of scene where, a character's thrown in a jail cell, right? And they don't have their technology, or it's set in the time before cell phones and they're there for a long period of time. I mean, I think about, gosh, there's a scene in The Stand where there is God, and there's so many characters in that book.
You're all right.
The character that's in the prison
hmm
and
I know what you're talking about,
how,
yeah. And I can't remember
right.
his name right now either, but I know who you're talking about.
And characters, they're dying. They're getting they're catching the captain trips and they're dying and he's watching these people cough up, blood and die and and he's not being let out. And it's this, and he starts getting he starts to go a little mad because then it becomes oh God, like now I'm going to starve to death. I'm trapped in this cell. I can't get out. Here's a rat. Where, at what point am I eating the rat? At what point am I killing rats and eating them? I think that it's terrifying, when you have no one else, right, to rely
It's
on or right.
Yeah. Well, it's so harrowing, one, to think about how difficult that is for us to do now. And like it makes me wonder in the big scheme of things, like where are we at as a human race that we are so distraught? Like what is the long-term ramifications of this?
Yeah. I
You
mean,
know,
even during,
it's
yeah, the pandemic, I think was a good dipstick as far as like sort of testing
yeah.
the water as to what happens when, and even though we had all this technology, well, I think that what we learned, I think we've forgotten, but I think what we learned at the time was it's not a replacement for actual human interaction
Yeah.
and, the degree of mental illness that sort of, proliferated due to the isolation, due to this sort of, and the claustrophobia, right, of not being
Yeah.
able to just be outside and breathe. Um, yeah, I think, and it's funny because I remember following the pandemic, seeing a lot of editors specify, please don't send any more stories about the pandemic. Please don't send any more.
Yeah.
It lended itself so well, right, to horror. And it really wasn't the disease aspect that people were writing about. They were writing about the isolation and the claustrophobia. Because that is, I think it's scarier because it's more abstract, right? With
Yeah.
disease, we can look at symptoms. We can say, oh, we'll give this to treat this. Whereas, how do you treat claustrophobia? How do you treat,
Right.
this feeling of loneliness? So,
Well, I
yeah,
think I think too, just to have a norm so disrupted, to me that I've never felt more scared than like right after the pandemic re-emerging and seeing like the lack of social awareness that we once had, or like the loss of like going to the movies is the perfect example. I have never lost my patience so much more than in a movie theater whenever people don't know how to act following the pandemic. Like everybody's acting like it's their living room, like the social norm of reverence in a movie theater is like out the window, right? And we talk about
hmm
that pretty frequently in the horror sphere. And like to me it was the shock of seeing the effect of all of that that was so jarring, like on the other side of it, like shit, we are not okay. It's so strange what you lose in those moments of isolation, and having to be on the other side of it and like taking inventory of that is really, really harrowing too. And I think
oh
that your
yeah,
book, to that point, your book, whenever, so to speak, things kind of lift, looking at the aftermath, that's equally another horror story in and of itself.
right, yeah. Um, Yeah, I mean, I think if nothing else, the pandemic and I don't think I even have. Oh, I did name the storm. It was Winter Storm Mia, named after my calico cat, who was a terror. Quite frankly, that's why I named the storm that.
I love it.
After she moves on, and after the pandemic moved on, it really, I think, the people that are left standing, um, yeah, are forced to sort of take inventory themselves, I guess, right?
Yeah.
I think we all felt a little immortal before the pandemic, and
Yeah.
the pandemic reminded us that no, you know,
Yeah.
we could be wiped out quite easily.
Very,
Quite
very
easily.
easily. Yeah, no kidding. Um, yeah, no, it's so fascinating. I love that horror gives us that vehicle to explore all that. And in particular with your book, I think that it does an excellent job of that. So that wraps up most of my book specific questions. The book has been out for, I believe, 1 or 2 weeks now. Time
Yes.
isn't real. I'm sorry. It's all a
Yeah.
blur.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
so what can we expect for you for 2026? This book came out. I know that you've got some other things that you're working on, so I kind of want to give you the space to advertise those if you can without getting in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. No. So I have working on longer pieces. I've sort of stopped writing as many short stories, but I do have two coming out this year. One is and this sounds like a bonkers idea, and it is, and the editors absolutely rocked it. It's coming out from Sabello Books. It's called
Yeah.
Look What You Made Me Do,
Yeah,
and
the
it's
Taylor Swift
all horror
anthology.
stories inspired by Taylor Swift. I have the closing story. It's
Hell
based
yeah, you
on
do.
the song Who's Afraid of Little Old Me, and it's got some teeth things in there. I'm just going to give you that. Let me give you that trigger warning. And so that comes out the end of March, I believe. Bridget's Gate Press is releasing a Women of the Weird West anthology in June.
Yes.
And Casey Griffith, she is a freaking rock star, is the editor of that. And I have a story in there, and which I loved writing. It's something that I would never have written normally. I don't do any sort of Western horror,
Yeah.
and I loved being able to do the research and write that. But even more exciting, June 1st is my third short fiction collection. It
Hell
comes out from Lathe Press. It's titled Unsettled Score, and it's all horror stories inspired by popular music.
That's
So
so exciting. God, such a good theme. I love that so much.
I'm so in love with this collection, and Steve Berman is so awesome as an editor, and the cover. Oh my God, I have been so lucky. I have been so lucky as an author and as an editor with the cover designers who have been assigned my books, because most of the time, I don't really have a say, and I just really luck out. Um, Anthony Galatas did the covers for Eminence Front and White Trash and Recycled Nightmares. Lynn Hansen did the cover for American Cannibal. Vincent Chong
Oh man,
is
that's a big
doing,
name.
oh my God, you have
Yeah.
to, so the limited edition of Eminence Front comes out in March. It's one of the most beautiful covers I have ever seen.
You do some stunning stuff, yeah.
He literally just said, like, hey, can you just give me a scene from the book that really stands out to you? And I sent him one of the scenes, and the cover embodies it in a way that I am like, I'm so in love. In fact, I'm so in love with it. I'm going to see if I can possibly buy the print of it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Unsettled Score, Ira Rat, who owns Filthy Loot Press, designed this cover. I don't want to say what it looks like because we haven't revealed it yet,
Yeah.
but it is so cool. Like, people have to buy the print version because what he does with the wrap,
Yeah.
it's oh my God. I'm just over the moon. I mean, I wish that I had these kinds of gifts that these designers and these artists have, because they really they grab something and they make me look really good. So I am extremely grateful. Extremely grateful. So, but yeah, Unsettled Score comes out in June.
That's so exciting.
Um,
I'm excited for that one.
yeah, and we'll have to wait to talk about things in 2027.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah. I know that there's always like a heavy limitation on what people can talk about. And like the day that I get like an email, like a strongly worded email being like, you have to stop harassing these people for what they're up to. I'm like, I'm trying to play by the rules. I'm just trying to inform the people, okay?
right,
Um,
exactly.
yeah. And are you doing any book events or like attending any book events this year that people can catch you at?
Yes. So in 2 weeks, so very soon after this podcast releases, I'm going to be in Boston for Boscone. So Boscone is put on by the New England Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Association. It's huge, huge, huge. It's right there in the Boston Seaport. I encourage people who are really, especially if you're into fantasy and sci-fi, there is a horror track, but I'll be there and I'll be on a few panels and selling copies of Eminence Front. But they do so many things there. They do like role play. They do music. They do so many things. So that's going to be the weekend of February 13th. 2 weeks later, I'll be at AuthorCon
Oh,
6.
nice.
It'll be my sixth AuthorCon down in Williamsburg, Virginia. And then in March, I'll be at Thrillerdelphia, which is Philadelphia's first horror-themed bookstore.
That sounds
So I'm
awesome. Yeah,
excited. Yeah, yeah.
that's
So
awesome. Yeah,
please
I'm
come
gonna.
if you're in that area. Please come.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
gonna actually be going to AuthorCon for the first
oh,
time.
oh, that's
So
fantastic. Oh,
I'm
I'm
very
so
excited.
glad.
Yeah, it's the first time I'm gonna get to go. I did my first Stoker last year, so I'm doing AuthorCon and then Stoker again this year. I'm trying to
Yeah,
make,
yeah.
my way to more things, but I'm really, really excited about that. I'm happy to be around book people again.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, the special guests for both AuthorCon and StokerCon this year, I mean, they're so cool. They're just so cool.
Yeah.
I'm so glad to see Jennifer McMahon
Yes,
at AuthorCon, and really that, I mean, Clay Chapman. I mean, it's going to be fantastic.
it
Yeah.
will. No, it's gonna be a good time. Okay, I think that this wraps everything up. Just about. Is there anything that we didn't mention that you want to bring up before we kind of wrap things up?
Hmm. No.
I
I'm
always
not.
throw that out there, like just in case I forgot something. But
I don't know. See, now you're making me paranoid.
oh no, no.
Paranoid. Like, is there something? And then, we'll stop recording. I'll be like, oh my God, Anna, I forgot to talk about. No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me on. This is so fantastic. I love your show. And so it's so fantastic to be able to be on it.
No, I appreciate you making the time, especially on a weekend and in all of the elements that we've been in during the last
Oh
few
my
weeks.
gosh.
It's
Yes.
certainly been a time. So thank you so much, Rebecca. Eminence Front is on shelves now from Clash Books. Everybody should go pick up a copy. But thank you again, Rebecca. This was an absolute delight.
Thank you.
Another really, really big thank you to Rebecca for her time. It was such a delight to get to talk to her, not just about her own work, but about some of the horror that freaks us out the most. As you can tell, we really cannot handle, movies like Talk to Me and Bring Her Back. It's just not for us. But it is a great time. Eminence Friend is a really, really cool novel. It has that kind of, I don't want to say cozy, but that lived in, very realistic human horror element that we find a lot in like Stephen King's work whenever we're in like a limited setting, we're getting to know these characters really well. But there's a unique spin as to the evil that's lurking among them and where they find themselves and the violence that kind of unfolds. So if you're looking for a very quick, violent, and quite chilling read, then I highly recommend Eminence Front. Now, looking forward to next week, I will be having another debut author on next week. I had Yaya Schofield last week, and now I will be having Sarah G. Pierce, who is the author of one of the most outrageous novels. The premise, I can't even, there's no words. Um, the name of the book is For Human Use. If you follow me on social media, you've definitely seen me talk about it. But I sat down with Sarah. We unpack her experience writing this book, her journey to writing, releasing this story, and just how kind of insane but perfect it is. It's a really good time, so I hope that you all stay tuned and listen back next week. I hope that you're all doing well. I hope that you're all staying warm. And yeah, until then, I'll see you guys.